exposing illness and injury, including the loss of fertility. Contrary to the stated purpose of furthering life, abortion bans are making it less likely that every family who wants to bring a child into the world will be able to do so and survive the experience. These women you will hear from today represent only the tip of the iceberg. This is the first lawsuit in the nation, but tragically, it is unlikely to be the last. This lawsuit, Zurawski versus Texas, seeks to rightfully return the life and death medical decisions to patients and their doctors, and not leave them up to politicians and state officials. Now I would like to ask Amanda to come to the mic.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Amanda Zurawski, and I'm here to tell you a little bit about my experience with the Texas abortion bans. Thank you for being here. Indulge me for a moment and close your eyes. Picture someone you hold incredibly dear. Can you see them? Good. Now imagine someone telling you that you are going to lose that person in the very near future, but they can't tell you exactly when or how. And on top of that, there's a very high likelihood that you will get extremely sick, maybe even near death, as you wait for that person you love to die. Sounds like a pretty sick and twisted plot to a dystopian novel, but it's not. It's exactly what happened to me while pregnant in Texas. About 6 months ago, I was thrilled to be cruising through the second trimester of my very first pregnancy. I was carrying our daughter, Willow, who had finally blissfully been conceived after 18 months of grueling fertility treatment. My husband and I were beyond thrilled. Then, on a sunny August day, after I had just finished the invite list for the baby shower my sister was planning for me, everything changed. Some unexpected and curious symptoms arrived, and I contacted my obstetrician to be safe and was surprised when I was told to come in as soon as possible. After a brief examination, my husband and I received the harrowing news that I had dilated prematurely due to a condition known as cervical insufficiency. Soon after, my membranes ruptured, and we were told by multiple doctors that the loss of our daughter was inevitable. I asked what could be done to ensure the respectful passing of our baby, and what could protect me from a deadly infection now that my body was unprotected and vulnerable. My healthcare team was anguished as they explained there was nothing they could do because of Texas's anti-abortion laws, the latest of which, by the way, had taken effect 2 days after my water broke. It meant that even though we would, with complete certainty, lose Willow, my doctor could not intervene as long as her heart was beating or until I was sick enough for the ethics board at the hospital to consider my life at risk and permit the standard health care I needed at that point, an abortion. So even though I had lost all of my amniotic fluid, something an unborn child simply cannot survive without, we had to wait. I cannot adequately put into words the trauma and despair that comes with waiting to either lose your own life, your child's life, or both. For days, I was locked in this bizarre and avoidable hell. Would Willow's heart stop, or would I deteriorate to the brink of death? The answer arrived 3 very long days later. In a matter of minutes, I went from being physically healthy to developing sepsis, a condition in which bacteria in the blood develops into infection with the ability to kill in under an hour. I spent the next 3 days in the intensive care unit, surrounded by my family who booked last-minute flights because they feared for my life. I spent another 3 days in a less critical unit of the hospital, all because I was denied access to reasonable health care due to Texas's new abortion bans. What I needed was an abortion, a standard medical procedure. An abortion would have prevented the unnecessary harm and suffering that I endured. Not only the psychological trauma that came with 3 days of waiting, but the physical harm my body suffered, the extent of which is still being determined. I needed an abortion to protect my life and to protect the lives of my future babies that I dream and hope I can still have someday. 2 things I know for sure. The preventable harm inflicted on me will medically make it harder than it already was for me to get pregnant again. The barbaric restrictions our lawmakers have passed are having real life implications on real people. I may have been one of the first who was affected by the overturning of Roe in Texas, but I'm certainly not the last. More people have been and will continue to be harmed until we do something about it. The people in the building behind me have the power to fix this, yet they've done nothing. In fact, they're currently trying to pass even more restrictive measures. So it's not just for me and for our Willow that I stand here before you today. It's for every pregnant person and for everyone who knows and loves a pregnant person. It is with and for all Texans who, like me, are scared and outraged at the thought of being pregnant in this state that I stand and fight. Thank you. At this time, I'd like to introduce my fellow plaintiff, Lauren Hall.
Hello, my name is Lauren Hall. Last year, my husband and I found out that we were expecting a baby girl. We were nervous about being parents, but so excited about this new phase of our lives. We began to prepare, gathering things like a crib, baby clothes, and maternity dresses. We told our families, and after some time, we settled on naming her Amelia. During my visits to my obstetrician, all the tests showed that our baby was healthy. There was a strong heartbeat, and genetic testing didn't indicate any problems. It was when we went in for our anatomy scan at 18 weeks, which is about 4 months pregnant, that everything changed. The maternal fetal specialist sadly told us that our baby had anencephaly, a condition that causes a baby to develop with no skull and very little brain matter. The words she used, incompatible with life, kept echoing in my mind. I became hysterical, and while my husband was holding back tears of his own, he asked the specialist what we should do. The doctor hesitantly told us of our 2 options: wait to miscarry, or seek abortion services outside of Texas. Stunned, my husband asked if there was no exception in the state abortion ban for cases like ours. I knew the answer, but I let the doctor speak, hoping she would offer alternatives or some secret knowledge that we were not privy to. She quietly and carefully explained to us that if we chose to terminate, we would have to leave my lifelong home of Texas. She suggested a few states that didn't have abortion bans, but told us that she would not be able to send our records or make a referral. We were completely on our own. Additionally, she told us to only tell people who were absolutely necessary in needing to know. She instructed us to say nothing to friends or coworkers, say nothing at the airport, and nothing until the procedure was completed. Over the next few days, I could not reach my obstetrician, who had undoubtedly already received the report from the specialist. As my mental state spiraled, I considered checking myself into the hospital in hopes that I could be given a sedative or something to help me calm down. However, not knowing how other providers would react if they learned we were contemplating an abortion, I opted to go without care. The following Monday, my husband and I showed up to our obstetrician's office demanding to be seen and to get some guidance about our next steps, but they refused to see us without an appointment. That evening, someone from the clinic finally called me. She let me know about online support groups for women who chose to carry anencephalic babies for as long as possible, and reiterated that I could not get an abortion in Texas. By this point, we had made our decision and booked an appointment at a clinic in Seattle. I would not receive a call from my obstetrician for 11 days, about 1.5 weeks, after which time we had already returned home. The trip to Seattle is a complete blur, but I remember protesters calling us killers, waving posters with pictures of dead babies at us as we drove to the clinic, and I remember the doctors and staff being incredibly kind and understanding. We received outstanding care in Seattle during the most traumatic time of our lives, care I had wished I could have received in my own state. It was not lost on us how fortunate we were to have the resources to make the trip out of state, as undoubtedly countless other families will not have the same options that we did. Now that we are expecting again, a baby boy this time, we fear everything. While I was calm during my previous pregnancy, I now compulsively look up every ache and pain, terrified that I will find myself in this unbearable situation again. Providers are scared to treat cases like ours without guidelines from the state, and more people will suffer and lose their lives if a change is not made. I love Texas, and it kills me that my own state does not seem to care if I live or die. And with that, I'm going to pass it to Lauren Miller.
I have a 19-month-old son. So, as we say in Texas, this is not my first rodeo. But from the very beginning, this pregnancy was very different from my first. Pregnancy's never easy. The nausea, the exhaustion, the shooting nerve pain. But this time, before I'd even had my first prenatal appointment, I found myself in the emergency room after 36 hours of relentless nausea and vomiting. This was not normal. But that was when I learned it was twins. Despite the shock and extreme sickness, I was thrilled. I'd always wanted 3 kids. I reached out to friends with twins for advice and started planning a celestial twins-themed nursery. We called them Los Dos, the 2. And every night before bed, my husband gave my belly 2 kisses, 1 for each. Everything changed at the 12-week ultrasound. The doctor explained that while baby A was fine, the same could not be said for baby B. In addition to measuring smaller than expected, he had 2 large fluid masses developing where most of his brain should be developing. Further testing revealed that our baby had trisomy 18, and later ultrasounds showed just one heartbreaking issue after another. You never want to hear that your son isn't going to survive, not even till birth. But what could we do? As my medical providers tried to counsel me on my options, they would stop mid-sentence looking for the words. It was like they were afraid that they would be arrested just for saying the word abortion out loud. I'll never forget when one specialist tore off his gloves and threw them at the trash. "I can't help you anymore," he said. "You need to leave the state." I appreciated that. It was direct. It was refreshing. After speaking with multiple doctors and genetic counselors, we kept arriving at the same point. Baby B will die. It's just a matter of how soon. And every day that baby B continued to develop, he put his twin and myself at greater risk. Something that I faced days later when I ended up in the ER for a second time. None of the anti-nausea medicines were working, and I was shaking and dry heaving so violently that I could not drive myself to the hospital. I just wanted to curl up and cry and mourn, but I couldn't, because we had to scramble to make plans to travel out of state for an abortion to give baby A and myself the best chance of surviving this pregnancy. We just felt completely lost. Like we were in a dark room feeling for a door. We couldn't even get answers to basic questions. I'm here today because I don't want anyone else to go through anything like what we went through. Politicians have tried to turn Texans against one another, to sow confusion and doubt, to make us wary of people we should trust, to create pain and punish those without extensive resources. I was lucky. I had connections with out-of-state doctors. I had family to watch my son. We had the time and the money to make the journey. But layers of privilege should never determine which Texans can get access to the health care they need. Politicians in Texas are prohibiting health care that they don't understand. They could do something, but they're not, and it's killing us. It shouldn't be controversial for an individual to make healthcare decisions for themselves in consultation with their doctor. But you can't get that in Texas anymore. This is not healthcare. Healthcare should not be determined by some politician with no understanding of medicine or the critical role that abortion care plays in pregnancy. How is it that I can get an abortion for a dog, but not for me? As politicians dehumanize us, please remember that we are real people impacted by these policies. You could find yourself or someone you love in my situation. I have lost one baby already. And if the Texas legislature had gotten their way, it makes it less likely that I and the baby that I'm about to bring in this world would be standing here today. So with that, I'd like to introduce Anna Zargarian.
Hello, everybody. My name is Anna. In September of 2021, my longtime partner, Scott, and I got a little surprise. I was pregnant, and although it was not expected, we were thrilled. I've always wanted to be a mom. Texas's abortion law, SB 8, had just enacted, and I remember thinking to myself naively, well, good thing I don't need an abortion because I'd only have about a day to get one. I felt good in those early months. We had a fun but modest wedding, and we zeroed in on a name, Evie. Then, one day in December, something was all of a sudden very wrong. I felt a gush of fluid and knew my water had broken. We went to the emergency room, tests were taken, and we were told my membranes had ruptured prematurely, a condition known as PPROM. The doctors explained to me how amniotic fluid is so important to the development of the baby's organs up until around 24 weeks, but that was more than a month away. And they said, even with the best neonatal intensive care, a fetus cannot survive outside the womb at 19 weeks. My heart broke into a million pieces. Excuse me. I didn't even know a pain like that could exist until that moment. Through my tears, I asked, what does this mean now? In every case of rupture this early, they said, termination is recommended and offered due to the risk of sepsis or bleeding, and because the chances of the baby surviving are slim to none. But then they said that under Texas abortion law SB 8, they could not offer me the termination I needed until my life was actively in danger. Because a fetal heartbeat could be detected, all they could do was wait and see if I would go into labor naturally or suffer a life-threatening complication that would allow them to intervene. I was so hurt and dumbfounded, all at the same time. I couldn't understand what was going on. The child I was so excited for wasn't going to live, and I needed an abortion to preserve my health, but couldn't get one in Texas. The serious threat to my body and to my health came as a total shock. I kept thinking, if this goes badly, will I ever be able to carry another pregnancy? More than anything, I needed to be home in the midst of a medical crisis. I begged my doctors to give me the care I needed. Please, just induce me while I'm still strong and healthy. There must be an exception in the situation. They said they wanted to help, but couldn't under Texas law. Where else in medicine do we do nothing and just wait and see how sick a patient becomes before acting? Finally, one doctor told me, you're wasting your time trying to obtain help here at home. So in my cloud of grief, I spent the next few hours coordinating flights, hotels, and worst of all, trying to find an out-of-state abortion clinic that could schedule me immediately. But they were all booked far in advance due to the influx of Texas patients after SB 8. Finally, after explaining my diagnosis and the time sensitivity, I got an appointment. I'm still upset that Texas robbed me of that time to breathe, to grieve, and to take in what was happening to us. Getting on that flight to Colorado was one of the most terrifying experiences of my life. It was like Russian roulette, knowing I was at risk of infection, hemorrhaging, or going into labor at any moment of the 2.5-hour flight. I spoke to my OBGYN the day of the flight to formulate a plan and made sure to pay extra for seats close to the restroom. I still suffer mental health consequences, including severe PTSD, because I had to fly during a medical crisis. As a human being and a patient, I felt like I had no choice during this nightmare. What I needed most in that moment was the choice that Texas lawmakers robbed me of, the choice to lose my child with dignity and with respect for my body and well-being and future. An already extremely difficult situation had an extra layer of trauma because of medical decisions that were made by lawmakers and politicians and not by me, or based on best medical practice. And that's why I've made this choice to join this lawsuit so that other people don't have to go through what we went through. People who think overturning Roe won't affect them, either because they can't get pregnant or would never choose an abortion, need to know what is going on because of these laws. Believe me, you never know when you or someone you love will need one. The state of Texas says they want to preserve life by banning safe legal abortions, but I've never felt my life mattered less than it did during this situation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anna, and thank you all for sharing your stories and making it clear just how dangerous these bans really are. We're now going to open it up for questions. If you have a question, please just raise your hand and I will call on you. If I call on you, please say your name and what outlet you're from before you ask your question. In addition to Nancy and the four plaintiffs here, we also have Molly Duane, who is the lead attorney on this case. She's available to answer questions as well.
Thank you for that question. What we do know is that the author of SB 8 sent a letter to the Texas Medical Board saying that the situation that Anna and Amanda were in should be covered by the exception. And so that is all that we're here asking for today. If the Texas legislature thinks that any of the people behind me, if their situation didn't count under the exception, then I'd like them to tell us.
Other questions? Yes. Yeah. Did you hear that question? So there are two doctors in this case who are plaintiffs. They are not here today, but they are both OBGYNs in the state of Texas. Molly, I don't know if you want to speak a little bit to the uncertainty that doctors are experiencing in these kinds of situations.
So I'd refer you to the complaint, which covers the situations of the Texas OBGYNs who are plaintiffs in this lawsuit in detail. But in broad strokes, what we have heard from them and from many folks across the state is that physicians are terrified. They are risking loss of their license, hundreds of thousands of dollars in penalties, and lifetime in prison. They're not even sure if they can say the word abortion out loud, as our plaintiffs' experiences clearly illustrate. So physicians are in an untenable situation, and this is the fault of the Texas politicians who don't understand health care, who don't acknowledge that abortion is health care, and who have done nothing over months and at this point years to clarify the meaning of these laws. And so that is what we're asking for today. Yes.
Hey, Eleanor Klivanoff with the Texas Tribune. Can you sort of explain what the legal remedy is that you're seeking, and if you were granted it, like what the impact would be for doctors in Texas?
Sure. So the legal remedy that we're asking for is pretty simple. We want the state of Texas to acknowledge that the women standing behind me should have received timely abortion care, and that women and pregnant people throughout Texas who face similar situations, similar pregnancy complications in the future, should be allowed to receive abortion care in their home communities. And as I said, to the extent that the Texas legislature or Texas politicians think that any of the situations of the plaintiffs in this case don't fall within the exception, then they need to explain that to us. So that is the remedy that we're asking for in this case. The other thing I'll mention is that we have made allegations in our complaint that what happened to the people standing behind me was a violation of their Texas constitutional rights to life, to liberty, and to equality. Roe may have been overturned, but people have basic human rights that were violated and that are being violated every single day in this state and around the country. So that is what we're asking for today. Yes. Did you hear that? You want me to repeat it? The question was, you know, what is it like to all be together right now in this moment filing this case that, you know, you may have felt really alone in the situations you were in when you were experiencing them. What's it like now to all be together and filing this case as a united front?
Y'all can join in too, since we're a united front. So pregnancy is something you go through on your own. It takes two to make a baby, but you're going through this on your own. And in a sense, you're already kind of isolated. To then go through this additional trauma where the state was saying you don't have control of your body was just further isolation. It was dehumanizing, and you just don't feel like a person fully. So to meet other people who have gone through this, for me, it was really powerful. It felt like I was not alone, and it made me feel like I could actually find my voice again and even just speak about what had happened to me.
I'll add that none of us want to be here. For me personally, I should be at home right now with a newborn, with my firstborn child, and I'm not. I'm here instead. We have all become involuntary members of the most horrific club on the planet. But we're just a very small representative of countless others who've gone through something very similar. We're not the only 4 or 5 in the state of Texas. There are so many people in Texas and around the United States that have gone through something very similar. And so being together definitely is powerful, but it's also traumatic knowing that there are so many people that are going through this. And I think that's why we're all here.
Yes. Sure. So, you know, it took some time to put this together, but I think what's important for people to realize is that it's very difficult. The stigma around abortion in this country is overwhelming. It is really difficult to come forward and tell your story. And these are folks, all the women standing behind me are folks who came forward and wanted to tell their stories. And then it was a process of figuring out what they could do to make some change. And so we are here on behalf of their lawyers, on behalf of Texans and women and pregnant people throughout the state, to advocate for them and to make change happen as quickly as possible. I think it's important to realize that the Texas legislature is in session right now and could do something about this if they so chose. So what we're looking for in terms of next steps is to hear from the Texas politicians who have, until this point, been largely silent. It's time for them to tell us what they think, and it's time for them to stand up and take responsibility for the harms that they have caused to the women behind me and so many countless others. So that's what we're looking for. Yes, Shafali.
So as you've heard, what's happening here in Texas, of course, is happening throughout the nation. There are 12 other states where abortion is completely banned and criminalized, and many more where there's still ongoing litigation. We know, and when you read the complaint, you'll see details from across the country about what's going on. So yes, we would further expect that others are going to come forward, and perhaps the strength of the plaintiff who come forward today, the 5 women who come forward today, will help give others strength that they too can hold their states to account for what they are doing.
Other questions? Going once, going twice. All right. Oh, yes, over here.
So I would invite you to take a look at the complaint, which goes into this in more detail. But essentially what we are asking for is for a court to interpret the exception using medical terminology. The law as written does not use medical terminology, which is why physicians have been left floundering to figure out what it is they're supposed to do in these emergency situations. So we have provided guidance to the court to the extent that we are able, but we invite the court to help us craft a remedy that will make sure that the harms that we are seeing every day around Texas and around the country do not continue to happen.
All right, last call for questions. Yes.
One more. Obviously, this is like not challenging, or not trying to overturn the law itself. Do you guys see any legal path towards overturning any of Texas's abortion laws, in full through the courts at this point?
So we're continuing to litigate SB 8 cases on behalf of a physician who was sued under that very strange bounty hunting scheme that we are all living under. So the center is continuing to litigate those cases in addition to litigating this one. So we are very hopeful that the court will provide some clarity and stop these immense harms that are happening every single day, that are robbing pregnant people of their human rights on a daily basis. And we're going to continue litigating here and around the country to make sure that this doesn't happen anymore.
And I would just close by saying a reminder, we are still in early days of the post-Dobbs reversal of Roe versus Wade. And so we would fully expect there's going to continue to be a lot of legal activity, both here in Texas and in other states, as well as at the national level. Ultimately, we need to have federal legislation passed so that in every state of the nation, you can have access to abortion care. The Women's Health Protection Act is that bill. And so as we continue to work in the courts and in the legislatures across the country, we will also be continuing to work for a federal solution to this unacceptable health crisis. Thank you.
All All right, that is all the time we have for today. Thank you so much for coming out. We hope you'll continue to follow this case. If you are interested in one-off interviews after the press conference or photographs, we're happy to accommodate if possible. And I also just want to thank some of our fellow repro orgs who came out today to support us, including, I know folks from the ACLU of Texas are here, some abortion funds are here, including Fund Texas Choice, Lilith Fund, T Fund. We really appreciate your support and you coming out to stand with us today. So thank you, everyone.